If you're planning to be in New York in the month of January, try to do it between the 18th and the 20th or so of the month. The reason is there's a couple of good things going on. If you're trying to trade collector, there might be an opportunity down here for you, at least to see some great things. One of the things I'm going to suggest you go to, if you've never been to it before, is the 70th Winter Antique Show, and it's held at the East Side House in the city. It's an amazing show. It's been going on since the 1950s. It's been around a long time, and all of the money goes to proceed. All the proceeds go to benefit the East Side House Settlement, which was established back in the 1890s as a community. Basically, it was like the first community outreach organization in the city of New York, and they do amazing work. You should look up on them. They have a website. They have a very good website. I highly recommend them. And they educate kids. They have schools for children, inner city children, children that are people, families that are really in need. And they provide educational programs, job opportunities, all kinds of great stuff. And all the money that you donate, if you buy a ticket to the show, it's a donation technically, and it's tax deductible. So you can get into the show pretty reasonably. Let me see here. If you head over to their site, this isn't. They didn't ask me to do this. I'm just doing it because I've been to the show many times over the years, and it is a lot of fun. You see some amazing dealers, and the tickets are pretty expensive. They're $25,000 for 10 of them, but if you don't want to go to the opening night gala, it's a lot less expensive. It's $40 for adults, 35 for seniors. Kids under 12 get in for nothing, and you can spend all the time you want there. It opens at noon, closes at 8 o'clock at night, and so forth. And it's a good show. It's a good show, and you see a lot of great dealers. If you're not familiar with all the dealers that are there, you should get to know them. They have a list of exhibitors here, and they are some of the best dealers in the United States, and many come over from Europe. You have your great jewelry, Adelson Galleries, Avery Galleries, Graham Ariter's old gallery. That's a great place. Bernard Goldberg Fine Art. They have modern art, Charles Clark, American Classical Furniture, Thibaut and Pomeritz, Clinton Howells, who you've probably seen on Roadshow a bunch of times. He's sort of a character. I've met him a few times. Back when we were running auctions, we would hear from him fairly often. Didier Limited, which is an art gallery and so forth. But they have all kinds of stuff. David Schorsch has a show there. He's the American folk art dealer, what he's most well known for, and on and on and on. But there's some great dealers there, as you can see. And this is the kind of stuff that I think there's 70 dealers. They've set up these giant booths. There's some carpet dealers there. Also, I should point out that if you just want to see Chinese stuff, Michael Goodweiss from London does the show, as does Ralph Chait Gallery. They usually have a great booth. I remember going into that booth 30 years ago, and it was amazing. And you can go and see all that. It's a good show. It's a good show. It's worth the time. And what you get out of it is you get to see some fantastic objects and in nice settings where you can really appreciate them. It's very much a sort of a museum setup. Many of the booths, it's like being in a gallery at a museum, except the difference is the stuff is for sale. The prices are heavy. This is a top end show, but what it's really great for is tuning your eyes towards art. It can be an extraordinary thing to see what's available in the market and realize that it is buyable, and then you can translate what you see as sort of the best of the best when you're out looking around, and you will come across similar things because many of these dealers, and I've known a lot of them, they pick around New England, they pick around the countryside, they go out and buy stuff from local galleries and shops and things, and they of course add a huge markup to them at times, but that's the business. But it's a great way to see things. It's a great way to go and look and educate yourself. And while you're in the city, right up the street at Christie's, they're having their Americana sale. And a lot of you aren't that interested in Americana, but at the back end of the sale, there is some great American export, China trade export for the American and the European market. The front end of the sale is full of fine silver, American silver, Tiffany, and all that good stuff. And it's worth going to see it. If you've never been to a Christie's preview, it's a lot of fun. They have interesting things. You can pick them up. You can handle them. These aren't the kind of things you get to handle in the average antique shop because they don't carry this sort of stuff. But absolutely great things. Lots of silver in the sale. And then when you scroll down here through this auction, let's open it up a little more. Should have done this before I started the recording here. All right, there we go. More silver, and then you get into Americana, folk art, a very rare painting by Joshua Johnson of a woman and child, painted probably in the late 18th century. estimated at 100 to 200,000. This kind of thing, folk art, weather vanes, all this cool stuff, interesting stuff, reflections of American taste going back a couple hundred years, and so forth. And I think it's a great thing to see. And then at the very end, on the last day, I think this is on the 19th. This is a 2-day auction, the 18th and the 19th. Um, is all this export ware. And there's some great pieces of 18th century export ware. And I'm going to go through a few of them, but I just wanted you to see these. And we'll get to these in just a minute. But while you're at the preview, if you go to the preview, check out the American furniture. I talked about antique furniture the other day in a video about how it's a great buy relative to buying modern furniture, which has absolutely no value the day after you buy it. This is great stuff. And this is coming from going through Christie's. All of these are vetted, great examples of American furniture. This is a very fine, happens to be a lot of the pieces come from here in Massachusetts. This is an Eastern Massachusetts federal card table, probably from somewhere between, I would guess, between Salem and Portsmouth, New Hampshire, somewhere in this area, estimated at $3,000 to $5,000. You say that's a lot for a card table, but is it? When you consider what it is, if you like it and it flips open, useful, nice looking piece of furniture, things like that. And then you have these great grain painted pieces of basswood from the southern Vermont Shaftonbury area. They would take rather simply done. This one was done in basswood, and the grain is not particularly great on these, so they would paint decorate them. And this is all hand done paint decoration from the first quarter of the 19th century. It's a wonderful piece of furniture. Then you have these inlaid federal period blanket chests. This one has the name of the owner on it, Benjamin Gibson, 1814. Estimated at $5,000 to $8,000. I think it's a great thing. And Chippendale, of course, you've all heard of block front desks. This is a Boston block front bureau. It's one that's been in a number of auctions over the years. It's fairly well known. It's been published, estimated, a big estimate, 40 to 60,000. But that's about a fifth of what the estimate would have been in the 1990s. This goes back to the old thing that when you buy in an overheated market, you pay overheated prices, and now the things are coming back onto the market, and now is a great opportunity to buy great American furniture at a relative bargain basement prices, and then that will change. This market will come back. It absolutely will, because the quality is there. And once you have quality things, they may go through periods of fluctuation in value, but the quality remains, and the quality will come back up because the quality always wins in the end. If you buy a thing like this, I suspect down the road it'll probably end up being worth, it's a lot of money, 40 to 60,000, but in your lifetime it'll probably end up being worth 5 times what it is right now, unless you're 90 years old. But if you're fairly young and you have some money, that's a great thing. And then you have this. This caught my eye because this is a style of chest that was made. This was made in my hometown, down in Marblehead. They produced some furniture there. They produced some very, very fine furniture. And this one is tied to those of you interested in the China trade. This had belonged to the Crown and Shield family, who were one of the founders of one of the biggest China trade merchants in the town of Salem. And this is the Crown and Shield family Chippendale mahogany Bombay chest of drawers made around 1770, right before the Revolution. A great piece of furniture. The Crown and Shields at that point were becoming extremely prosperous and became more prosperous as time went on. And this was one of the first things they bought because they needed something of quality. And there were lots of cabinet makers in the area in Salem, Boston, and a few in Marblehead that turned out extraordinary pieces of furniture. And this is one of them. This is a really, really great looking chest with beautiful brasses, estimated at 100 to 150,000. And then you have this. This is an amazing Chippendale made by Benjamin Frothingham, who was a cabinet maker in Charlestown, Mass., just outside of Boston, and not far from Marblehead and Salem, only about 12 miles away. And he produced this. And this was in the famous Israel Sack Company's Good, Better, and Best book that was published back in the 1950s at this point. But it became sort of the Bible for American furniture collectors. And those of you who have never really looked at one of these, they are extraordinary pieces of I call them architectural fashionable furniture because of the way they're built. And they have these spectacular broken arch pediments with flame finials, and then these fluted columns going down the sides. A beautiful wood selection, this fabulous mahogany, either from Honduras or from Cuba, that was been brought up at that point in trade by trading molasses and other things. They would pick up wood and bring it back, and it would go to Charlestown, where the cabinet makers would go to town on this thing. And the quality of the work is just stunning. And the batwing brasses, of course, are beautiful and all that. Very, very classic. And this has a big estimate on it. It's estimated $60,000 to $90,000, but not at all outrageous. Not that many years ago, this would have sold for a lot more money. But right now is a great time to have it, and they've got the complete provenance. It's sold twice. It's sold twice at Sotheby's over the last 20 years. So apparently, it probably ended up being bought by a dealer who overpriced it, couldn't sell it, or had too much money tied in it, and we put it back up for auction. So this is the kind of thing I would if you really love furniture, go examine that, see how that was made. All right, and the next thing up that caught my eye in the sale, and we're going to get to the ceramics in just a second, but these are some of the things that I think to appreciate art in general, you have to look at all of the arts from different periods and culture to get a real sense of it. And the China trade porcelain of the period was meant to go on furniture, around furniture like this and this. All right, that's the punch bowl that you see, or the great pair of figures that would have come back from China as part of their global trade at the time, would have ended up in the home of a wealthy merchant and maybe put on top of a bureau like this. All right. But this is coming up for sale now. This to me seems like a fascinating object. If you're interested in American history and interested in the Revolution, this is a snuff box that was gifted to Daniel Constable from Thomas Paine. And Thomas Paine, of course, wrote The Rights of Man. He was a British guy that came over to the United States a year or so before the Revolution began. He was a big supporter of the Revolution. He fled England and went to France, and he wrote all kinds of pamphlets and books. He's considered to be really the literary starter of the American Revolution. The things that he wrote were believed to have spurred on the revolutionaries during the period. And he was so disliked that in England, they were trying to get him. They wanted to put a price on his head. And he came to America, and he was an abolitionist. He was a total abolitionist for slavery and things like that, way ahead of his time in many quarters. And that did not make him terribly popular, but he was a very controversial figure in his day. Today, we look upon him as a Revolutionary War hero and author. But in his day, a lot of people hated him. A lot of people loved him. And this was his snuff box. And it was cased in silver in 1806 and given to his friend Daniel Constable on November 1st, 1806. That's when he died. But it's a fantastic piece of American history, especially if you're interested in the literature. He was brought over to America from France. He went to France, and they put him in jail because he was considered to be sort of a revolutionary. And was it Monroe? James Monroe was a young man, and I think Benjamin Franklin. I think it had a lot to do with getting him out of jail. He came to America. He published books. He was very critical of George Washington. He thought he was a bit of a hypocrite on some things because he owned slaves, but he was talking about freedom. Very interesting guy. And this is his snuff box, and this rode around in his pocket for his life. And it's been given this beautiful cover with the engraving on it and everything, denoting the gift. It's estimated at just $4,000 to $6,000. And for me, that seems like such an amazing table object to own if it could be bought for anywhere near that price. I don't think it will. I'll be shocked if it sells for the estimate. Absolutely shocked. And to me, it just means somebody got an amazing buy, because I think this should be worth much, much more than that when you consider who it belonged to and who he was and the influence he had on creating, basically turning America from a colony into a country. And it's a really great thing, and that's one of the reasons you go to auctions. You see these things and you think about who they belong to and the context of the culture from which they came, and it makes it all much more interesting. Nobody cares about an 18th century snuff box of just regular that belonged to somebody, because everybody had snuff boxes. But when you have the snuff box that belonged to somebody that had so much influence It's a wonderful thing to own and I think reflect on. So that's all just my views on it. But get over to the Christie sale and look around. Go to the East Side House Settlement Show. Take a look at the shops. $40 for the dealers, $40 a ticket. It's peanuts. And then you can go to the auction and have some fun and look around. And while you're there, um, you're going to see some very good China trade. I want to just get back to it for a second here. There's a whole pile of it at the very end of the sale, and some really fine examples. And I want to talk. We're going to talk about these jars at the end, so stick around because these are two of the biggest of this type I've ever seen. They're massive, and we're going to talk about them. But the first thing that's coming up, one of the first things in the things I want to talk about is this really nice first quarter of the 19th century Jiaqing period, as they call it, export armorial ice cooler for the Scottish market. This is a beautiful thing, beautifully made, wonderful armorial crest. The crest is in great condition all the way around. It looks to be fabulous. The gilding on the handles are pretty much unworn, which is very, very unusual. And they've shown some nice shots. It all appears to be in good order. I don't know if it's been restored or something, or is it just this is naturally in perfect condition. But it's a very, very nice piece of China trade based on a European form and turned into an ice cooler. If you're having a party, you keep some ice of this in your bar. It's pretty nice. 10 inches tall, estimated at just $2,000 to $3,000. It should bring more than that. I think some of these estimates are artificially low, but a very rare piece of China trade in the form of an ice cooler because you don't see ice coolers very often. And then these are really rare. A pair of export dragon carp terrine covers and stands. These are modeled terrines they made for the export market, but basically of these dragon fish with their under trays. Extremely unusual. But what's most unusual is you have both of the terrines with both of their under trays, which is unheard of. Usually, you might see one of the under trays, you might see that under tray, you might see one of the terrines, but to get all four in a lot, I think is quite extraordinary. And they've got a good estimate on them, $40,000 to $60,000. They were made in the 18th century during the Qianlong period, but I think they'd be fun to go and see and look at least, just to study them. They're so beautiful. And then I like this because it has an earthy quality to it. This is a really nice biscuit glazed laughing Buddha. And you'll see the same Buddha form used in the Ming Dynasty with children climbing on them, carved out of rhino horns. It was a very popular depiction of the laughing Buddha. And what I like about this is that the white area is just unglazed biscuit. So it has a very natural earthy tone to it. You can see some blushing up here on the shoulder from the kiln, and you see some natural sort of firing cracks going through it. But I just love the character, the quality, the zen of this thing. I think it's really great. And then you have this sort of checkerboard pattern robe that he's wearing, which is rather unusual. And he's got great eyes, and but they glazed his mouth and his tongue, which I find interesting. They put a little bluish clear glaze on there, but a very, very nice piece, and it's pretty good size. This isn't tiny. It's 7 inches in width, so it's got some presence to it. It's estimated, it's Kangxi period, of course. It's estimated at $5,000 to $7,000. And then over to this, there's a lot of figural biscuitwares in this sale. If you've been thinking about collecting a few pieces of figural biscuitwares, you want to look at the sale because there are pieces in here that you're going to recognize that were on the covers of books, or similar examples were on covers of books like the Copeland collection at the Peabody Museum. And I think there's a few things in here that came from Marchant in London, who have sold many, many great pieces of these biscuitwares, as Ralph Chait, Cohen and Cohen, all the top dealers, all these great dealers handled most of the stuff, because this is where the people who have the kind of things that end up in Americana sales and end up at Christie's or Sotheby's often buy from these big collectors. We saw it this past spring, the Wolf family collection that was sold at Sotheby's, and they had all that great Americana, everything from Chippendale all the way through the 1950s and arts and crafts and everything else in between. They bought most of their ceramics from the top dealers like Marchant and Ralph Chait and so forth. And this is the kind of thing you're going to see. And here you have these really nice group of boys standing and playing and talking. Absolutely charming. Estimated at $5,000 to $7,000. And then you have this. This thing, I think this is on the cover of the book, The Private Trader. It's on the cover of one of the books that we have. I can't remember which one. Is this really great export rose vert European subject coffee pot? It's estimated at just $6,000 to $8,000. I think this thing is fantastic. This is a great looking coffee pot with sort of this serpentine monster body handle over here, and then the head coming out over here, and then the European figures with staffs and so forth around it, and all these beautiful secondary decorations. Very nice piece of porcelain, estimated at $6,000 to $8,000. That's a great thing. These are sort of iconic items in the export trade and in that world. And I think right now they're just in a ridiculous low prices. I think it's just frankly crazy. And then you have this. You have three Qianlong period European market dishes, all beautifully done. On the left, you have an outside feast with a young maiden with a wine pitcher and so forth, and people sitting around a table, chickens on a farm scene, and then you have some European nobles, and one of them is reaching out and getting his thing, having wine poured into it, and then over here you have a couple of suitors, I guess you would call them, pursuing this very pretty young lady, and one of them is leaning up against a whiskey barrel playing a song, and of course it's all part of romance and socializing back in the period during the 18th century, what it might look like. And all three of them are for sale in this lot, $4,000 to $6,000 estimate. And absolutely, wonderful pieces of porcelain. And then over here you have this. This is an interesting thing. It's a barber bowl, and on the top of it, it has "Sir, your quarter up." And I think that means your quarters are up, and it's an English expression which you don't see very often, and it goes back to the 18th century, and it basically meant you get yourself in order, get your quarters in order, you get your life in order, you get cleaned up, and this is somebody who's had a nice shave and a haircut at his barber, and he's putting himself in order, basically, is what I believe this is what this means. It doesn't mean you owe him a quarter. In payment, your quarter's up. It means you're in good shape. You've gotten tidied away. You've gotten squared away. And to see this on a barber bowl, I think is very interesting. And this was made as a barber bowl. This wasn't a bowl. Some of these barber bowls you'll see around, they'll take a good piece of porcelain that's an oval platter, and sometimes they'll cut away this section down here and add. Sometimes I've had them with I had a Ming example where they cut it off and put a lead strip here to make the thing serve as a barber's bowl once it had gotten to Europe. And this is another example here of one that was made that way with this beautiful scene of the birds in the middle, estimated at $3,000 to $5,000. I suspect a lot of these low estimates too probably are going to have fairly reasonable starting prices and may not have reserves. They didn't post them as no reserve, but the reserve may be fairly minimal. You may be able to feel them out on this. And then you have this. This is probably one of the most finely done Chinese export punch bowls from the 18th century, third quarter, 1775 or so, that I've ever seen. It's absolutely fantastic. I've seen this style before, but this one is amazing. The quality of the decoration. The quality of the decoration of this for China trade, absolutely stupendous. Absolutely stupendous bowl. And here's a scene with a brick wall in the English countryside and so forth, and these very interestingly colored trees blooming, exploding with color and so forth. And then you flip along over to here, the interior, there's a lone rider on a violet colored horse in the middle, which is, I think, absolutely great. And then fairly simple with a floral border around it. But the outside of the bowl is just stupendous. And this was sold, still got it on it. The Cohen and Cohen in London sold this to the previous owner. And there it is. It's a very, very good bowl. It's just absolutely. If you've wanted to own a good English hunt bowl, I would go after this one if you can afford it. It's estimated at $12,000 to $18,000, which I don't think is outrageous at all. That is an absolute rarity when you compare it to some of the other hunt bowls around that do very well, and there's nothing wrong with them. But this one is a cut above. This is clearly a cut above, and it is 11 and a half inches in diameter. And the only history on it is Cohen and Cohen, which means they probably got it directly from a family in England that owned it, because that's where they operate from, and they sold it to whoever the current owner is here, the collector. And then you have this. If you like early Arita ware, these are mid 18th century Arita ware images of porcelain of horse recumbent horses, and these are things you don't see very often. And it's the kind of thing you do see on if you go out if you're out in America going around and you go to a nice old estate early federal period house here in New England, something like that, you might find, if the house was still furnished in its original form from the 18th century, you might find these on a mantle, having been brought over from England during probably the early 1800s. And you certainly find them in the English countryside, because they opened up to the markets from Japan much earlier. And you'd find these in a house in the country on a shelf or something as porcelain decorations. And of course, they copied these too in Europe when they began making porcelain. You'll often find recumbent horse scenes and themes and so forth for the horse crowd, the hunting crowd. And these are very, very nice, estimated at $7,000 to $10,000. And then the big jars. These are stupendous. The only thing, these are, I'm going to start off by saying these are 32 inches tall. Now we've all seen lots of these in the 12 in the 10 or 11 to maybe 14 inches tall, that size. So which from a measurement standpoint would put them about up to here. These are enormous. These are massive, massive jars, and they were done in that style we talked about in the video the other day about the fakes, that they're copying so much these days. These are originals. The decoration on them is a cut above. I have to say, the decoration on these for this palette, for this color palette that was so popular. This was like almost a stock pattern in the China trade wares of this period. But the quality of decoration on these. The details are just stupendous when you look at the faces and the robes and the folds and so forth, and they're enormous. These are very, very big with these sort of blue and red food lions on top, very expressive. And the only thing that might slow them down a little is that this one here is a little bit crooked. And this was because of their size. These were so darn big that this one listed off a bit. Now, if you're looking at them head on, they look absolutely fine. That's what they look like. They look okay. But from the side, one of them has a decided tip to it, and it's not that it's been restored or anything, but it's just what happened when it was made, because it was a little bit top heavy and it tilted over. So there you have it. And there's another detail of the decoration. Again, you can really, really zoom in on it. But notice the little things like this little sort of root table in the back, or a root urn, whatever this is, with flowers coming out of it. And then you have all these very fine lines that were drawn in to show the water around the area. And the very nice gilding is still intact and so forth. These are very, very good. Nice. There you have a couple of lovers on the veranda with a brush pot off to the side, and they're reading a book, maybe of poetry or something. It's absolutely charming. And they're estimated. This is the thing it blows my mind. They're only estimated at $10,000 to $15,000. And in the past, we've seen single vases of this style turn up even on eBay that are 15 inches tall, 18 inches tall, and they sell for $7,000 or $8,000. So here you have a pair that are double that size, and it's a pair, 10 to 15,000. And if they sell for that range, I'll be flabbergasted. I suspect they'll bring upwards of 30 or so thousand, maybe more, if somebody absolutely has to have them. These are extremely large. I just can't emphasize that enough. It's very, very unusual. I think the biggest ones you typically see really top out at about 18 inches, about a foot and a quarter shorter than these. So these are very, very unusual, and the rest of the things are pretty great all the way through too. I don't want to just focus on those, as though everything else is not worth looking at. These are some of the other pieces, and they're absolutely great. And they also have a lot of these chin-long lady court figures. If you've always wanted a pair of them, you get a shot at about, I think there's one, two, three. There's three pairs of them. And then you have these over here, these biscuit figures. So there's lots of opportunities, but there's three pairs of the Chinlung court ladies. These are particularly nice, where they're holding lotus flowers. Um, Very nice, beautifully done, great quality, and they're holding these massive lotus flowers in their arms. And the coloration of the robes, mixed with the gilding, is exceptional. I think on these. I think these are really very, very fine. Estimated at 10 or 15,000, and they are 11 inches tall. So they're pretty good size. They're almost a foot tall each. 11 and what is it? 11 and 3/4. 11 and 5/8, basically 11 and 3/4 inches tall. It's basically 12 inches, call it that. Absolutely great looking things. And that's just some of the stuff that's down there. And there's some other auctions. I did check over at Sotheby's. They don't have anything really like this coming up. They don't seem to be doing an Americana auction this year. Christie's is, and some of the dealers that'll be at the East Side Show, of course, they often have open houses if they have a gallery in New York for invite people to come over. And that's something you can have fun doing too as well. But I would absolutely recommend, if you're a China trade collector, take the time to go to this Americana sale, because I think there might be some opportunities there. I'm hoping there is. Um, you never know. You might be able to go in there and wet your beak a little bit. All right. And that's it. So have a great week. I'll be back. I'll be back tomorrow with the regular weekly video. We'll talk about some things that are going on, and just before Christmas. And Merry Christmas to everyone. If you don't catch us tomorrow or any other videos this week, I hope everybody has a great Christmas. And thank you for subscribing here on YouTube. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoy the videos. Make a comment, and so forth. So see you next time. All right. Bye-bye.